bedroom?
Why, yes. Yes, I did.
Oh, he is such a bad boy.
Hey, man, what's this show about anyway?
Politics. Religion.
Say what? Don't you know you're not allowed to talk about that stuff?
It's time to break some rules then. Prepare to get triggered and be made uncomfortable because here's your host, the JaceMan, Jace Barnett. And this is Those Two Things.
Hey guys, as you just heard, I'm the JaceMan, Jace Barnett, and I gotta start out with an apology. This show is not going to be as polished as I want it to be because I've been putting out fires all morning long. The intelligent thing for my personal life actually would have been to just blow it off and do it later. But I made a commitment to you guys just a day or two ago, and I said that I wouldn't be doing that anymore. You could set your watches around 10 a.m. Central, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, be bringing you live content. So I wanted to keep with my commitment to you, and so I'm here. But I did not get a chance to prepare for anything or get anything ironed out. Nothing I really have pre-told myself that I'm going to talk about. So what that probably means is we're probably going to delve a little bit deeper into some of the issues we already got into, and maybe talk about some general concepts that I truly believe in as far as political and religious discourse and discussion go. As a matter of fact, having said that, let's start by saying this. When I bring those two things into your life 3 days a week, what I'm really trying to do, what the purpose here is personal growth. For me, yes, but I hope that that's what you're all seeking out of it as well. Whether we agree or disagree about one topic, 5 topics, 10 topics, 100 topics, I truly believe that the purpose and the goal should be that, we are able to discuss things without wanting to cut each other's throats or pull guns out and blow each other away. You know, I like to say that one thing that seems to be different about me than a lot of people is I believe that the vast majority of people out there tend to believe that they start out in a situation where they're already at odds, they're already in disagreement, they already see the other person as the enemy, and the opposition is hateful and stupid and so on and so forth. And at that point, they work backwards. I try to start from a different position. I try to start from the position that there really is no opposition, that we're all in this together, that we all want the same thing, even if we totally disagree about how to get there. And what I mean by the same thing is I want to believe that all of us want a better life for ourselves, a better life for our families. And so, again, we'll even disagree as to what a better life looks like, right? Some of the things that you might like or want, I might look at and go, that's perverse, or that's terrible, or that shows no drive, or what have you. And we might have some real disagreement. But even in those disagreements, I sort of believe that those disagreements really fall apart again into the how. It isn't necessarily that we truly disagree, in my opinion, about what it is that we want. Again, we want goodness. We just sort of disagree about what goodness is, or what goodness looks like, or how to bring goodness about. And so it's fair. It's fair. It's fair to say a person's wrong. You know, in this politically correct world we live in, an interesting thing is telling someone that they're wrong is hateful. Well, newsflash, both sides tell the other side that they're wrong. And this political correct thing where if you tell someone that they're wrong, you're hateful, that's nonsense as well. You can certainly tell someone they're wrong. And you can do so in a respectful manner, and you can do so without hatred in your heart. The fact of the matter is, if you think that you're right about something and someone has a different opinion, you obviously believe they're wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying so. As a matter of fact, that's one of the interesting things. I'm a very outspoken guy. I'll talk to a stranger on the street about anything. I'll tell them my life story. I don't mind talking, and I also don't mind listening. That's another thing that I think separates me from a lot of people out there. I'm more than willing to hear you out. But something that has often been said about me my entire life is, Jace, you think you're always right. And I look at that and I always chuckle. I always laugh. I'm like, of course I think I'm always right. Who doesn't think they're always right? Everyone thinks they're always right. What I mean by that is we all have opinions, right? And I've yet to meet the person who says, I think I'm wrong about this, but I'm going to cling to it anyway. I know I've got this completely wrong, but I'm going to go down with the ship. No, we all think that we're right. Even when we realize that we're wrong, we don't see ourselves as being wrong. And what I mean by that is not that we continue to cling to that, but what happens is our position may shift. There are things that I think today that I didn't think 20 years ago. My opinion has changed. But at no time on that timeline did I become wrong. What happened was I was right when I thought this, and now I've got some more information, some new facts, and it has revealed to me, and now I believe this. I'm still right. I'm just right with extra facts. I'm still right because I have different... But the second we realize that we're wrong about something, if you're intelligent, what you do is you shift. You shift. Which is another interesting thing. Both sides in recent years have taken to calling the other side flip-floppers when someone switches sides about something. And I thought it was ridiculous when my side was doing it to John Kerry. I think it's ridiculous when people were doing it to Trump and doing it to Ted Cruz or other people. The fact of the matter is, you should be open to flip-flopping if you get new information. Anyone who has the same opinion about every single thing that they thought as a 5-year-old that they think is a 50-year-old, it's not just a matter of they think they're right, like I was saying a minute ago. It's a matter of they believe that the original opinion that they held was right and nothing could change that. I believe we have to be open to new information. And so that's kind of what those two things is about. It's about us taking in new information, us discussing them. If we start out on opposing sides at the start of the discussion, I'll hear you out. I'll hear you. I hope you'll do the same for me. From what life history has taught me so far, you probably won't. Most people do not go into it willing to hear the other side out, but I am. And I truly believe that my goal, since you think I'm always right, since Jace thinks he's always right, yeah, I do. As I just explained why. It's a natural thing to think you're right. Because if you think you're wrong, you're kind of dumb to maintain it. If you think you're wrong, then you probably shift opinion, which means you're still going to think you're right. You're just right about something different, right? I've talked about that enough now. But the point is this. The point is this. If you're open to new discussion, what is the purpose of being open to new discussion? By my estimation, the real purpose to being open to new discussion is so that we can grow, so that we can be enriched, so that we can make our lives better, so that we can make the lives of those around us better. And the best way to accomplish that, in my opinion, is through communication, is through research, is through sharing that research, and through talking about the research and discussing things with one another. And me telling you not only what I think, but why I think it. Hearing you out, not only what you think, but why you think it. I think this is very powerful. I think it's something that we need to do. And so that's why I buck this entire notion that you're not supposed to talk about politics and religion, because you don't know who you're going to offend. I think that's nonsense for several different reasons. First of all, I'm going to tell you honestly, there should not be anything offensive in hearing what someone thinks or why. That should not offend you. Now, I can't tell you what to be offended by. No one can tell you what to be offended by. So if you are offended, I'm going to go back in a second as to why other people's thoughts and opinions shouldn't offend you. But before I do that, I'm going to play devil's advocate immediately. and say, well, you can't say what offend. You're right. But I will talk about why I think it's nonsensical to be offended in just a moment by those things. But to those people who are offended, whether it's myself, and I've been offended many times in my life, or to you, if you are on my side, or definitely if you're on the opposing side, here's what I would say to you. Maybe you will be offended. We were not promised that we would go through life without being offended. There are worse things in the world than being offended. In my opinion, and I can't speak for anyone but me, I would much rather be offended with the truth than pleased with a lie. Because if you give me the truth, whether it is facts that I don't like, or your true opinion about something that maybe I don't care for, at least if I'm armed with the truth, I can prepare for it. And I can decide what my next steps are going to be. I can decide how I'm going to approach it. I can decide what I want to do about it. It's kind of like going to the doctor. Doctors can treat illnesses and injuries and stuff, but they can only do so if there is first a diagnosis. And that diagnosis needs to be accurate. That diagnosis needs to be truthful and honest. Once you have that, then you can go on and worry about treatment. But you can't treat something without a diagnosis. And I can't prepare for what to do about this world if I'm not armed with the facts. I think both sides, now I am staunchly conservative and I'm a Christian conservative, so you know where my worldview is coming from. And I am a born-again evangelical, okay? I'm not going to hide from who I am. But just because that's what I am doesn't mean that I think that everything the political right in my country does is correct, or the way they act is okay, or that every view or words that's spouted from the evangelical, born-again evangelical movement is correct. There are things that I take issue with everywhere. Of course I take issue with opposing ideology. Sometimes I take issues with the ideology of people who were in the same box. By and large, it's not necessarily the ideology, it's maybe the tact or the approach or the behavior that I have issue with. And we will talk about those things as well. But here's the thing. If you tell me that I am wrong and you share some data with me, I may question your data, right? I may say, well, where did you get this information from? And what was the agenda of the people who gathered this data? And what were they trying to prove? Data can definitely be manipulated. We're not silly. We all know that, or should know that. The interesting thing is we're very, very apt to push back against data that comes from the opposing source. If I'm a Republican and a Democrat gives me some data from a study, I'm very, very likely to be skeptical with that data. And very, very likely to push back against it and say, that's nonsense, or where'd you get this from? Or, sure, pal. And the opposite is true as well. If you are a left-leaning person, if you are a progressive, and I provide you with data from a study that shows that maybe the facts that you have aren't so, you already know that I have an agenda. You already know that I have a bias. So you're very likely to look at that data with skepticism and be like, yeah, well, anyone can provide me a chart. That doesn't necessarily mean the chart is true. And I would say, that's right. That's right. It doesn't mean the chart is true. Here's the challenge, though. To step back and realize that when the data agrees with you, that's not confirmation that you're correct. That is confirmation of your bias. And we will speak about confirmation bias a lot in this program. But that doesn't mean that the data is correct. It doesn't mean that the data is accurate. I believe we should view all data with skepticism, whether it comes from a source that we like or it comes from a source that we don't like. We should be skeptical. We should question. We should demand answers. We should also not be lazy. What I mean by that is we should be willing to do the research. We should be willing to go find the answers. We should be willing to go look. It's fine to be skeptical. It's fine to be doubtful. It's not fine to be closed off from opposing viewpoints or closing data. And it's not fine to simply reject something and then be unwilling to go do the work or go do the research for yourself. If you want to reject it, fine. But then get off your lazy hindquarters and go find out what's behind it. Go do the research. I'm a true believer in this concept as it pertains to religion, as it pertains to politics, as it pertains to life in general. So that's what I would say to you there. Now let's go back to again, you're not guaranteed to be unoffended. But why I also said that I don't think hearing people's opinions should be offensive. You see, you have a right to the thoughts that are in your head. You have a right to the feelings that are in your heart. I have those same rights. And we are shaped by various things. Our worldview comes from our familial upbringing, the communities that we grew up in, the sources of entertainment that we tune to, where we spend our Sunday mornings or afternoons, the schools that we attend, the post-secondary schools that we attend, the news channels that we watch, or maybe I should say news channels, the social media platforms that we plug into, the people that we're connected to on them, our own bias, things that we enjoy versus things that we don't enjoy. Our worldviews are all made up of different things. And I think some things are subjective. For some things, maybe there is no right or wrong. For other things, I think that there is a concrete right or wrong. And even that, me saying that some things are subjective and some things are objective, even that is an example of my own bias and my own worldview. Maybe some of you believe that all topics are subjective. Or maybe some of you believe that all topics are objective. I believe the truth is somewhere in the middle. And we all arrived at those conclusions based upon things that we think, things that we have observed, things that we have felt, things that we have dealt with. And so that's fine. It's fine. But here's the thing. If you want people to accept your thoughts and opinions, hear you out, or believe that you are entitled to them, there's honestly no way to ask for that, or demand that, or want that, let alone expect it, unless you're willing to concede and offer the same. I want people to hear me out. I do want to be heard. I'd like to think I'm not alone. In fact, I'm quite sure that I'm not alone. You want to be heard as well. If we want to hear, we have to be willing to listen. And that means we have to be open to listening to the opposing view. It's just the way it is. So the other day we talked about gender issues. We talked about sexual orientation. We talked about Father's Day and the attack on males and the role of the father and masculinity. We'll probably talk about some of those things again. But before we delve into some of the things that we've already talked about, I said, I want to keep things kind of generic, especially since I wasn't ready to go on because I was dealing with stuff around here. So another concept I want to talk to you about with those two things, why we're here, what the show is about, open discussion, open discord. I don't think there's anything wrong with having discord. Dialogue is great. Logical discussion is great. Staying calm and cool is what I prefer to do, and I think that is the best way to handle things. But I'm not saying that you can't be impassioned about something. I'm not saying that people can't engage in an argument. Things can get heated. I don't think that's always bad. I think you should probably try to avoid the heat for as much and long as you can. But sometimes a little passion, sometimes a little heat is okay. And I don't think that that makes the person bringing the heat your direction is a creep, a jerk, or whatever. And when you get that way with others, I don't necessarily think it means those things about you either. We should try to be calm as long as we can. Sometimes we need to be heard and we want to be heard. It's very important that we're heard. That's equally true of them as well. Sometimes they need to be heard. So maybe you got to raise the volume, or maybe you got to change your tone, or maybe this, maybe that. There's a lot of maybes. The question is, are we adult enough to realize after things get heated that the heat can dial back later? And that even if we were engaged in some verbal fisticuffs today, that doesn't mean we have to be at each other's throats tomorrow or carry lifelong grudges. That's nonsense. So this segues perfectly to a concept. And that concept is something I find interesting. What I find interesting is that we often find ourselves in situations where, and by we, I am talking to my people now, my fellow Christian conservatives, my born again evangelicals. Specifically, I'm talking to us. And then I'm going to talk to everyone. But I find that we often land in places where we believe that our morality needs to be dictated to everyone else. That we need a law on the books to validate and confirm that which we already believe. So hold on one moment. One moment, you're going to get to see the joys of live stuff here. The joys of live streaming. Disobedient pets. So, sorry about that. They were distracting me. Anyway, having said that, you see, we act like what we believe to be true, or maybe what we know to be true, should be given to everyone. We should tell them how to think, act, and feel. Especially, again, for us born-again evangelicals. We have the Bible. It tells us what is right and wrong. It tells us specifically what to do, what not to do, how to think, act, feel. And I believe God's word. I accept God's word. It makes me, it forms me. At least it should. And I try to allow that to happen. But then we act like everything that's in that book also needs to be a law on the books. And I have a problem with that from a couple different reasons. Number one, God does tell us to obey God's law, but he also tells us to obey man's law. And I think part of that there is why we sometimes sort of demand that our morality is cast on everyone else. That we have a law on the books for this, that, and the other thing. And I don't think that makes a ton of sense, if I can be completely honest. I don't think that makes a ton of sense. Reason number one is that while God does tell me I should obey man's law, the state of Missouri, where I reside, is not my ultimate boss. They're not my ultimate judge, jury, or executioner. The United States of America, the nation in which I call home, the flag that I love, is not my ultimate source of authority. They are not my judge, jury, or executioner. You see, my state and my nation, they are not God. They are not the Lord of my life. That position is reserved for him and him alone, the risen Savior. And so what I would say is this. If I'm going to let God be God and let God be God of my life, do I really need man's laws to echo God's laws in order for me to obey them or abide by them? I do not. We'll look at concepts such as gay marriage specifically. Now, I'm a licensed minister. and I've been ordained in several different churches. Do I approve of homosexual marriage? I do not. Why don't I? Specifically because God does not. Do I necessarily believe that means that we need to have a law, a state, federal law against it? I don't. You see, I will say this. I don't believe that the states or the state should be in the marrying business. I believe that that should be a spiritual matter. But whether I believe that or not doesn't change what is. Our states are in the marrying business, and I accept that. And again, I don't need the state or the states to echo my own worldview or confirm my worldview for me. I already know what I believe. So I don't need there to be a national or a state law that says two fellows can't get married or two ladies can't get married. I'll stand in opposition to it because I think that God stands in opposition to it. And as a pastor, I believe that I need protections ensuring that I don't have to conduct something that I don't believe in. So I don't believe that the state or the states should ever demand that the church unite people that they don't believe should be united. That should come down to the person conducting the ceremony, and I believe that God's people should stand up for what God says. Similarly, newsflash, when I was senior pastor at different churches, I would often have young people come to me for premarital counseling. Straight couples come to me for premarital counseling. And I would ask them if they were engaged in premarital intercourse. And I asked this of every one of them. And probably 7 out of 10 of them would claim they were not. Which is a great answer if you're a pastor. That's the answer you want to hear. So out of the 70% that told me that they were not sleeping together, how many of them do I actually believe? What percentage of that 70% did I truly believe were keeping them their hands and other appendages to themselves? I'm going to be honest with you. I believe it was way less than 50% of that 70%. I believe that the vast majority of them were probably already engaged in these marital relations. Now, I can't do anything other than speak to those who are giving me data. They're not there. I can't be like, oh, you're lying to me, unless I've caught them in the act, right? But outside of that, I can only speak to the 30% who are being honest with me and sharing, oh yeah, we're doing that. We know we shouldn't. But you know what? In those cases, I can't tell other pastors what to do. I can't dictate for them what their conviction is from the Lord. And the Bible also makes it pretty clear that if you are sleeping with someone, you should marry them. But I challenged these couples when they would say that they were sleeping together. And I'd say, okay, well, you should get married. However, I'm not going to marry you because I'm not going to put a blessing on this and unite you in holy matrimony if I don't think that what you're doing is seeking God and having a holy relationship. So if you want to get married, if you want to be married by me, then you're gonna have to demonstrate that you want a cord of 3 strands. You want God to be a part of your relationship. You want to do the right thing by Him, by yourselves, and by each other. And that means I can't change what happened yesterday. You can't change what happened yesterday. But you make a commitment to me right now that you guys aren't touching each other again until you get married. Sometimes they'd already be living together. And I would tell them right after, one of you got to figure out where you're going. Sometimes, and it was rare, I'll be honest with you, sometimes the couples would look at me and say, we understand, and we'll do that. And I applauded them, and I agreed to marry them, and I did marry them. Other couples, very quickly, they would be like, no. Who do you think you are? And I would say, you're pastor. And are you going to marry us or not? I'm not. Other people can. Other people will. Some other pastors might. This one won't. unless you're willing to comply with that request of what I believe is biblically correct thing to do. And if no pastor will, you could always go down to the local courthouse and do it that way. And I would tell them that. And sometimes they would tell me things like, but we want a church wedding. And I'd say, well, they need to be willing to have a church marriage and a church relationship. And by church, I mean spiritual. And by spiritual, I mean Bible believing and God following. Now, in the interest of transparency, I'm not perfect. I have had sex outside of marriage. It's not okay. And I wish there had been people willing to stand in the gap for me at those times and say, Jace, knock it off. Unfortunately, I didn't have people willing to do that for me. And I sinned. Now, you might sit there also and say, well, if you have done sin, who are you to tell anyone else not to? A human being, because we've all sinned. And so if the barometer is that you can only speak out against sin if you're without sin, then none of us can ever speak about sin, which I guess is really what the progressives and the seculars, the leftists in this country want. They speak about hypocrisy, right? And who are you? And that's the game they want to play, is, well, how can you possibly tell me if you've done it? It's a fair question. The Bible refers to plainkai. Again, we talked about this. But the other side of that is true too. Who are you to do that? To talk to someone else about sin if you're a sinner? Probably a great person. Because you've gotten to experience the consequences of sin. You've gotten to see the destruction that is brought into your life. You've gotten to experience the regret and remorse of the things that you have done. And potentially, if you're instead of worried about shaking a finger at someone or yelling at them or telling them how terrible they are, perhaps you want to spare them of pain. Perhaps you want to do them a favor. Perhaps you want to do them a solid. And you're more prepared to do that than someone who hasn't been down that road, because you know the destruction that it has wrought. Okay, so having said that, I would tell them, I'm not going to marry you unless you want to change. Because notice, I was talking about heterosexual relationship there. I was talking about a heterosexual couple there. We in the church need to stand up and start talking and telling the truth. That is just as wrong as the other. It's just as wrong as homosexual relationships. Both cases, people are deliberately disobeying God, and they're entering into sexual relationships that they're not supposed to be in. That is a fact. That is point blank. Okay? But it's easy to sit there and worry about the way the other person is sinning. So again, I don't think I need a law from the government saying that which is okay or confirming that which I think is okay. I already know what rules I'm are supposed to be abiding by, what rule book I'm supposed to be playing. God has said, Jace, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Instead, do this, this. I know what to follow, even if my state or federal government doesn't endorse it or agree. And as far as I know, they can't make me violate these personal principles. And that's the only time that I really think that we need to speak up. When the state, either on a state level, or the state meaning the national level, the federal level, only when the state wants to dictate to us and force us to conform or change the way that we go about our daily lives, or the way that we worship, or the way that then do I think that we need to stand up and go, no. We're not going to let legislation do this. We're going to fight to make sure that legislation matches what we believe. But unless they are dictating that you have to follow along, why is it so important to us that their laws match my laws? My laws. His laws. I don't feel like it's important for me that they match. I don't need them to match. I'm going to follow God. My neighbor can follow whoever he wants. As the old saying goes, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's not important to me that everyone else is. It's not important for me that a bunch of fat cats in Washington, D.C. are. It's not important to me that the folks in Jefferson City, Missouri see and understand morality the way that I do. Let's get off of the religious train for a moment. Let's get off the sexual train for a moment. Let's look at another topic that is incredibly divisive and makes people heated. Let's talk Second Amendment. Let's talk guns. Let's talk firearms. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. This is a fun one because this is another topic, much like the sexual one, where I give people on both sides of the aisle ample opportunity to be mad at me and hate me. I'm an equal opportunity victim here. I let both sides can't stand me and toss death threats my way because I don't tell either side exactly what they want to hear. And part of that is, again, because of those two things principles. I believe that we can have differing opinions, and that doesn't make me lose respect for you. Unfortunately, it does seem that a lot of you lose respect for me. So be it. I can only speak for this guy, and I can only act for this guy and think for this guy, and so on and so forth. But anyway, having said that, guns. The part that makes my core constituents not like me so much is that apparently, if you are a conservative, or if you've ever voted Republican, or anything of that nature, not only do you have to be a Second Amendment supporter, a Second Amendment advocate, but you have to love guns. Apparently, it's a requirement that you have to like guns, and if you don't like guns, something is wrong with you. You must be walking around with a holster on your side. You must go shooting 2 or 3 days a week, and you must know about every firearm that's out there and truly, truly love shooting. It's a requirement, apparently. I fall short of this requirement. I don't like guns. I'm still a Second Amendment supporter. I'm still a Second Amendment advocate because I believe in the principles in my Bible, and I do believe in my Constitution. And I am a freedom guy. I am a patriot guy. I am a liberty guy. The way this dovetails with the sexual thing real quick, about having laws in terms of whether or not gay marriage should be allowed or not. It's different because guns and this is not a spiritual matter. But the difference is, again, I don't need people to like what I like or accept what I accept or endorse what I endorse to give them the freedom to go off and do things. Unless it's working against me, my family, my loved ones, so on and so forth. Unless it's infringing on others, I pretty much feel like you do what you want. Now, that doesn't mean I approve of what you're doing. It doesn't mean I like what you're doing. But I believe that you should have the right to do things that I don't like. As long as the things that you're doing that I don't like don't hurt me or those around me. If the things that you're doing do cause pain, grief, or destruction to those around me, then no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. But if it's not, I don't really see why everyone thinks that the laws have to match our own personal beliefs. This is why I've long said that most people don't really have conviction, they have convenience. We don't have convictions, we have conveniences. That is to say that I truly believe that the vast majority of us, our legal interpretation, our legal views, what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed, what should be legal versus what should be banned, oftentimes match our own sense of morality or the things that we enjoy. If Jace likes it, and Jace wants to do it, and Jace takes part in it, then it's perfectly okay and everyone should be allowed to do it. And if you don't think so, then you're trying to infringe on me, and tread on me, and step all over me, and shame, shame, shame. Who do you think you are? I can do my own thing. You don't know my life. Get back. I do what I want to do, right? But on the flip side of that, for whatever reason we act like if I don't like it, if it isn't attractive to me, if I don't engage in it, if I think it's wrong or it just doesn't interest me, why does anyone need to do it? If I think it's wrong for me to do it, it must be wrong for you to do. You shouldn't do it either. We want our own sense of morality to mirror the legality. And I don't think that should be a requirement. I don't see a need for it. So again, I don't like guns. I don't love guns. But I still think you should be allowed to own one. Or 2. Or 5. Or 10. Or 20. Or 100. You should be able to have as much ammo as you want. And you should be able to shoot them as often as you want. Shouldn't be able to point them at anyone. Shouldn't be allowed to blow anyone away. But you can have it. Not because I like it. Because the Constitution says so. And I believe you have a right to do things that I don't like. Similarly, like with this thing, again, the right hates me too. Even though I just offended them, they still hate me, especially when I say this. There's a question that has long been asked out there. And it goes like this. It goes like this. The left loves to say, if there were no guns, though, wouldn't the world be a safer place? And then the right likes to quickly chime in and go, you're dumb. There's other ways to kill people. You can kill people with a knife. And excuse the dye that's on my hand. I've been doing a lot of lawn work. You can kill people with poison. You could kill people with a bow and arrow. You could kill people with your fists. Right? You don't need a gun to kill people. So that's what the right likes to say, is that's their explanation for why the world wouldn't be safer without guns. I've always thought that's a bit of a strange thing. Strange response to that argument. I'll talk about why both sides are strange. But my fellows on the right, I've always thought that response, that you can kill other people, why that is a weird thing to prove your point that the world wouldn't be safer. I simply believe that, like, if you remove dangers, if you remove threats, if you remove risks, things inherently get a little bit safer. I could talk about how the left also loves to say, well, who needs that many guns? Or who needs a gun that can fire that many shots of ammunition? Who needs a weapon that can fire so rapidly? I think those are fair questions. As a Second Amendment supporter, I also think that it doesn't matter if they need it, they're allowed to have it. It isn't necessarily about need in many cases. Now, a lot of times the right will say this too, but they'll also say, well, you don't know what the opposition is going to have when they approach me or my family. Maybe you naturally think that I don't need something that holds 20 rounds and can fire 20 rounds in a second. And if I was under normal circumstances, if I was just out there hunting deer, maybe I wouldn't. But you don't know that some crazed fellow isn't going to walk up on me who has something that can fire 18 rounds in 2 seconds. If I'm going to defend my family, I want to be packing more than he's packing. Okay, that's fine. That's how the argument goes. Back to the other side, though. Not about needs-based thing, but about want. Have. Freedom. You can carry that, okay? But again, safer, right? The right says, well, it wouldn't be any safer if we got rid of these guns, because there's other way to kill people. And again, I say, well, what if we remove certain risks? What if we remove certain threats? It's kind of like this. We like to act like it's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. I saw this with masks. I saw this with the guns. I see this with abstinence. I see this with all kinds of discussions. I'm not just a licensed minister. I'm also a licensed insurance salesman. By the way, if your family, I'm not licensed in 19 states, soon to be all 50. If your family needs an opportunity to protect themselves against that worst case scenario, you may want to comment below and let me know what I can do for you. Or if you've had you've had a child, maybe you recently got married, maybe you bought a new house and you want to protect against those things, I could probably help you. All right, weak plug aside, let's go ahead and talk about how, again, in insurance, it's all about risk and risk mitigation. Many of us have children, right? and we set off to child-proof our homes. Well, let's just be honest. Let's just be honest. Let's just call a spade and be factual here. I can go set off looking to remove dangers in my home. But no matter how good I am or how much time I put into it, how careful and diligent I may be, there's no way I can make my home 100% safe. There's no way I can remove every single danger that could become my child or befall my child in that home. Would we then say, because we can't remove all of the danger, that the home is no safer with some of them removed? Would we then say that because we can look around and we say, okay, there's 75 dangers here. Realistically, we can only get rid of 72 of them. Because there's still 3 dangers remaining, would any logical person amongst us go, well, they ain't even worth trying then? Those 3 dangers are still there. Might as well not even get rid of the other 72. No! Most of us would still remove the other 72 because we know that even if it's not 100% safe, it is safer. There's less risk. The insurance companies will give you better rates on your policies if you are a better risk. Maybe you're likely to go out there and your track record says there's a really good chance that this guy's going to wreck his car in the next couple months. And as a result, maybe they won't insure you because you're so high risk. Or maybe they will insure you, but they'll insure you at a crazy high rate. Maybe you've been incredibly responsible your entire life. Maybe your car has all the bells and whistles. You've got safety cameras and airbags and backup cams and all sorts of packages and things of that nature. You've got your OnStar. Maybe they look at it and they say, okay, you can't guarantee that nothing's going to go wrong either. But you pose less risk to our company than that fella over there. So you both get a policy, but you're going to pay less. Why? Because yours is safer opportunity. It's not safe universally and unilaterally. It's not guaranteed, but it's safer. It's less risky. I look at the same thing with guns. Do I think the world would be a safer place if they didn't exist, if they weren't here? Again, I'm going to get hated for this. But my answer is yes, I do think the world would be a safer place if guns didn't exist and if they weren't here. Now that I successfully made my fans and my friends and family members mad at me, let's go ahead and switch gears and make the opposition mad at me again too. Just because I believe that the world would be safer if guns didn't exist doesn't mean that I have rose-colored glasses on or that I'm in this utopia world. I accept the fact that we live in a world in which guns do exist. And much like oftentimes when that genie gets out of the bottle, you can't put the genie back in. We can't go to a place in the future, more than likely, if we can. This is not one generation, not two, it's a lot of generations in the future where we won't see guns. And by then, the only reason we won't see them, it will be because they will be replaced by whatever the new equivalent of a gun is. In other words, something that makes a gun no longer that important. Because there are things that are more lethal quicker. We have decided a long time ago as a society, as a civilization, as a species, that these are things that we're going to do. We can't rewind or unwind and undo that. It's a fact. So we live in a world where these things do exist. And this is where, again, I do kind of echo and agree with the people who share my ideological viewpoint. And that is to say, even if every person, every man at my church voluntarily gave up their guns, voluntarily gave up their firearms, and they'll tell you they're not going to. But even if they did, because I believe at least the ones that I know, wouldn't hurt anyone, would never fire on anyone. So maybe they take it upon themselves to just give them up, okay? Now, the reason they won't is because of the second part of this. But even if they did that, you're not going to convince me that the inner city gangs are going to give up their guns, that the cartels are going to give up their guns, that the desperate drug addict who's going into the convenience store or the liquor store to get a couple hundred measly bucks out of the register because he can't get his next fix, that he's going to give up his weapon or firearm. The fact of the matter is, people, there are bad people out there. There are people out there who will seek to do you harm. And so, even though I don't like guns, when my buddies say that they feel more comfortable carrying so that they can protect themselves and their loved ones, I understand it. I get it. I don't like them. I don't own them. And if that does, not theoretically, that does make me an easier target. I accept that. I don't want to fire on someone. I don't want to be, and if I'm put in that situation, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. But I do believe that the things that I believe are true. And I do believe that if you take my life, I will go to heaven. I will be healed perfectly. Pretty much I'm like, okay, if you kill me, again, I don't want to die. I don't want to. But if you do, I'm like, what have I lost? You've sentenced me to victory. The victory that I'm hoping to get anyway. Now again, I kind of like this breathing thing, right? I'm not looking to get to eternity any quicker than I have to. But I believe what I believe is true. I don't think it's empty. And so if it happens today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, I believe I win in the end. Now, again, when it comes to defending my family, they're not me, right? Get a little bit more emotional. Get a little less spiritual when it comes to go ahead and kill me if that's what you want to do. If you want to threaten my loved ones, well, I don't carry and I don't own guns and I don't like them and I won't. In those moments, if that were to happen, I might regret it. I might wish I owned one at that time. Make no mistake about it, though. If you're trying to hurt them and you have a weapon, I will be the first one that you take out. Because I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you don't get to them. If it means using something like this, if it means hitting you with rocks, broomsticks, pots and pans, if it means using my wrestling skills, which are pretty top-notch, by the way, to take you down and try to disarm you, you might fire. You might shoot me. You might take my life, and then you might go after my family. I accept that reality. I accept that's the world that we live in. I wish it was, and I wish there weren't creeps out there. And again, if I found myself in that terrible, terrible situation, maybe then I wouldn't just be a Second Amendment supporter or a Second Amendment advocate. Maybe I would seriously think, man, I sure wished I had a gun right now. But because I'm not a fan, I can tell you this. You might win, and you might take me out. And God forbid you might take them out too. But if you do have more than one victim, I will definitely be the first. And I will do everything within my power to make sure that there are no additional victims. If it's not a headshot and you shoot me in the stomach, if it's with my dying breath that I'm crawling over to you, because I've still got a little bit of strength left in me, until the heart stops beating, I'm grabbing you, I'm wailing on you, and I'm screaming for them to get the heck out of there. What does all of this mean? What does all of this mean? What is my point? My point goes back to where I started this. I don't believe that just because we have a morality, and we all have it, we all have our own sense of morality, and it may come from differing sources, but I don't believe that our morality has to mimic and mirror the legality system. And my morality doesn't have to be your morality. Not only does my morality not have to match, I often think that sometimes morals and liberty kind of butt heads. I want to live in a country where you are free to do a lot of things that I wished you wouldn't. I want to live in a country where you're free to do a lot of things that I don't like. Now, that does not mean carte blanche. It doesn't mean that I think you should be allowed to do anything you want to do. Again, it's a very, very, very tight line on this. And it's not the Bible. It's not spiritual. Again, I'm going to do my best not to do anything that God says don't do. And I would encourage you all to live a life that way. But I don't think that we need Washington, D.C. to tell you that you should follow the Bible. So what is my line if it's not God? My line is what I said almost an hour ago now. And that is, I believe that people should be allowed to do what they want as long as it doesn't hurt others or infringe on others. I think that you should be allowed, not that you should do, there's a lot of things I think you should be allowed to do that, you shouldn't do. But I think that you should be allowed to make that choice for yourself. You should be allowed to do a lot of things that I don't like and that I hate, as long as what you're doing doesn't hurt me or others. The second you start hurting others or me, that's when I say you no longer have a right to make that decision. You no longer have a right to do that. Like abortion, okay? The cry there, we're going to end with this. I'm up against an hour right now, and I've rambled on and on and on. But again, we all know, this is not newsworthy right here, we all know where each other stands, but the big difference between the left and the right is the left loves to say, respect a woman's choice, and my body, my choice. And of course, people like me like to say, that's not your body, and it's not your choice. You don't have a choice to end the life of another person. Of course, the disagreement there becomes, is that a person? And I don't understand why this is a disagreement. Obviously, it's another person. It's another person. And so, again, that's how I see the line between morality and legality. If you want to do something, I don't think you need my approval or God's approval to do it. And if I don't want to do something, just because the law says I can, doesn't mean I have to. I said I don't like guns. I also don't like alcohol. I don't drink. I'm over 21. I'm free to have a drink if I want to. But I don't want to. It doesn't appeal to me. I don't think it's good for me. I think it has a lot of negative consequences. So you know what I do? I don't sit out to ban it and tell you that you can't have one and you can't have one and you can't have one. I simply choose not to do it. I simply choose not to drink. I don't need man's laws to look exactly like God's laws, and I most definitely don't need man's laws to match my own convictions. I do have convictions, not conveniences, and I would invite you to do the same, and I would implore you at the same time to have open dialogue, open discussion with others. Find out what they think, what they like, what they don't like, and then ask a crazy, crazy question. Ask why. Maybe it will be enlightening. Maybe you'll learn something. But even if you don't, you're no worse off. You get to know someone a little bit better. There's worse things. Till next time.
Did you like that? Do you want more? Then you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. Hated the show? Hated Jace? Want to put Jace on blast? That's fine too. Let us know in the comments. And whether you love us or hate us, join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for another opportunity to talk about those two things.